Hello and welcome to video 2 of this module. We have a lot of ground to cover in this video. We are going to continue on with the same SPSS file that we've been working through in the last couple of modules. So if you have that ESL file handy, you definitely want to grab that out again because we're going to be using the data from that again. And we are going to be talking about univariate graphs and charts. We are really going to take a deep dive into the types of charts and graphs and visuals that we would use for the different types of data we have. So remember, our levels of measurement, we have nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio data, right? So we have categorical variables and we have continuous variables. And we use different visual models for the different types of variables that we have. We touched a little bit on that on the last video, but we are going to look into that even more with this video. First, we're going to make a pie graph. And remember, pie graphs only deal with one variable. They might have multiple categories within a variable, but it's only one variable. And we're going to have a pie graph that has several categories within that variable that have lots of descriptors and lots of adjectives that can be kind of convoluted and confusing. So the first thing we're going to do is transform a variable again, and we are going to recode or rename those convoluted adjectives that might really distract somebody from trying to interpret it into simple 1 or 2 word labels. As we transform variables, we are again going to talk about the benefit of using some sort of codebook or cheat sheet. That is going to be your best friend for dealing with this type of work. Then we are going to recode those values into new labels. So remember, we make a value a number, like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that doesn't mean anything. So if you remember in that last video, that was one of the first steps we did when we combined hours worked, and we said 1 hour to 10 hours, and it was labeled as a 1. And that wasn't really intuitive. And so then we went back and we took those values and we renamed them as labels. We're going to do that again in this video. Then we're going to talk about the difference between a bar graph and a histogram and what type of variables you will use for each of those visual representations. Finally, we are going to talk about subsampling and binning to once again make our data a little easier to read and a little bit easier to interpret for the people who we're trying to make this data meaningful to. So we have a lot of ground to cover, so without further ado, let's go ahead and switch our view and jump right into the lesson today. Now we are going to do some fun things with univariate charts and graphs. We are going to be looking at the variable of race and ethnicity, and then within that one variable, there are multiple categories. So again, we still have that same file that we've been working with. It doesn't matter if you're on the data or variable view to start off with. We're going to be going back and forth. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to graphs, and then we're going to go to pie, and then this will pop up and it'll say summaries for groups of cases. That's what we want. So we're going to click define, and then this box will come up, and now we want to find over here, we want to find our student's race and ethnicity. So it's a nominal or categorical variable, so it has that little icon. We're going to click on that, and then we're going to click it over to define slices by. Then we're going to click OK, and this is what's going to come up. So notice a couple things. First, what I was saying before is that this is one variable, the student's race and ethnicity, but there are multiple categories within it. So we're going to do 2 things today. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to combine this. So notice how there's a lot of words: American Indian, Alaskan Native, non-Hispanic, Asian, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, non-Hispanic. So there's a lot of adjectives, and we're going to make it much more simple. And we're also going to change the order. So it's going to require a little bit of thinking and a little bit of note-taking, but let's go ahead and give it a go. And the first thing we're going to do is transform our variable. So we're going to go up to transform. We're going to recode into a different variable. And we are going to start with students' race and ethnicity. And then we are going to say by race. And this time we're going to put COM because we're going to combine it. Okay, so my label is going to be race and ethnicity combined. And this should make sense in a minute. So I'm going to click change, and that has my new variable there. And then I'm going to say old and new values. And this will pop up. So because we're changing our order, we're going to jot down some notes off to the side. So I'm going to pop that up on the screen so you can I quite literally just like jotted it down on the closest scrap piece of paper closest to me. So whatever works for you, do that. And then we're changing the order because Dr. Koh says that he's pretty systematic in the order of race and ethnicity he kind of catalogs all of his work with. And so we're going to change the order into that order. And I just wanted to point out one more thing to you is notice this. We have Hispanic no race specified and Hispanic race specified. We're also going to combine that into one category. So we're going to do a lot of work. That's where our little scrap notes are going to come in handy. So let's go ahead and get going on that. Okay, so my old variable, and again, we have to use numbers. So it would be a lot easier if we were using categorical information, but we are using numbers. So we're going to say 1, and that corresponded with American Indian. And that 1 is now going to go to Native American 5. Okay, so hopefully this is making sense with that little cheat sheet that I showed you a second ago. So let me go ahead and do this, and then I'll pop back in and talk to you about it. Okay, so here are our old to new variables, which the numbers mean nothing unless you have that little cheat sheet next to you. And notice here the 4 goes to 3 and 5 goes to 3 because those were our 2 different Hispanics that are now both going into the number 3 that we will label Hispanic in just a minute. So hopefully this is making sense, but in the end it should. So now I'm going to click continue, and okay. So now what I want to do is I want to come back over here, and we do need to be in variable for this next step, the variable view. So I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to add these. Now I'm going to have my value and my label. So my value for 1 is going to be labeled as white. And then also I wanted to point out, I didn't point this out in the other video, but notice how we have some decimals over here. If you want to get rid of those, let's go ahead and come over here and see where it says decimals. Just go to 0. And then now if you come over here, it has 0. So it doesn't really matter, but if that annoys you, that's how you get rid of it. All right, so now I have my values and my labels. So we're going to click OK. Now we're ready to run our pie chart again. So let's see if we can get it to work. Now we want to take this out. So we're going to move that because we want our new variable. So we're going to click our new variable in there, and then we're going to click OK. There it is. All right, so you can go ahead and double check if you want to make sure. So like purple was our white non-Hispanic, and it took up the most space. And so we can see here white, it's a new color, new order, new color, new name, new a lot of things, but we can still see the shape. And so that's the same size. And let's go ahead and just do one more thin one, American Indian, and then we change it as Native American, and it's that really thin. So you can take the time to double check that, which is probably a good idea to do because we did a lot of things in one go there. So the next thing that we want to do is have our percentages. This would also be a really efficient way to check your work too. So we are going to double click on this, and when we double click, this pops up. Then we're going to go up to elements, and we're going to go to show data labels. And notice that it defaults to a count, but we want it to say percentages. So we'll click on percent, and we'll click our arrow up, and then we're going to say our count, and we're going to get rid of our count. It'll push it down there, and then we'll click apply, and voila, there we have it. So again, that could be another way you can double check. We could just go ahead and click this and do the same thing, and that would be another way that we could double check to make sure that we recoded everything correct. Now we are going to make a simple bar graph. And as a reminder, bar graphs and histograms look very similar, but there are some very important characteristic differences, namely that bar graphs have spaces between the bars, and they can only be used for categorical data. Whereas histograms do not have spaces between the bars, and they are used for continuous variables. So that's a really important difference. If you have a continuous variable, you cannot use a bar graph. And if you have categorical variables, you cannot use a histogram. So that is important. I'll point it out once we have it up to look at as well. But let's go ahead and make a bar graph with the data we were just using, or the variable we were just using. So we're going to go to graphs, we're going to go to bar, and then more options will pop up. We're going to keep it simple, and we're going to have our summaries for group of cases. So we're going to click define, and notice that it will already have the variable that we just used. So if you wanted to change it, you would have to take it out, but this is actually what we want. So we're going to leave that in there, and we're going to click OK, and there we have it. So we have our race and ethnicity combined, and we have this. So our categorical data, or nominal, however you want to look at it, is on the x-axis, and then our frequencies or our counts are on the y-axis. And then we have our spaces between the bars, and so that is how we know it's a bar graph with our categorical variable. Now let's make a histogram. So we will go up to graphs, we will scroll down to histogram, and of course we need to use a continuous variable this time. So we're going to come back over here, and we are going to use that hours worked per week again. So we're going to click on that, and then we're going to click on the arrow. So remember, 2 ways to get it over. You can either double click it or do it the way I just did. Then we're going to click OK. And this is what we come up with. This will be easier to read if we start chunking down here on our x-axis, if we say like 0 to 5 hours per week, and then 6 to 10 hours, and so on. In just a minute, we are going to do something called subsampling. There are many different purposes for this, many different times that we would use this strategy. So take a look at the 0 hours worked per week. This is dominating the histogram, and it's making it really difficult to read everything else. And so because it's doing that, it's kind of taking away the meaning and making it difficult to interpret the histogram. Another time you might want to use a subsampling strategy is when you only want to see the results of a variable across another variable. For example, maybe we just want to see how many hours per week females work. And so if we were to do the subsampling, we would be able to create these bins and allow us to subsample. But a final thought on it is that when you subsample, it allows you to keep all of the data. So when I'm going to put all of these in bins in just a minute, I'm going to capture all of the data and put them together in groups. I'm not omitting anything. And so that will make more sense in just a minute when you see how we put them in these little bins. But for now, just know that the reason I'm doing it is because this 0 hours is pretty much dominating the histogram and making it really difficult to make meaning out of the other hours that people work per week, and it's allowing me to keep all of the data. And what we're going to do, we're going to come up to data, and then we're going to go down to select cases, and we're going to have it on a condition. So if condition is satisfied, we're going to click on that. Then we're going to click the if. Then we're going to go back over to our by works. We're going to click that in, and you can use your keyboard or the keyboard that they give you, and I'm just going to use this. And so I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to click on 0. Okay, so if by works is greater than 0, and I'm going to click continue and OK. So first thing I want you to notice is off to the side, look at how all of these have slashes, or many of them have slashes through them. Okay, so it's not going to count that data because we wanted to know greater than 0. So let's go ahead and run our graph again and see what it looks like this time. So we're going to leave that variable in there. And here's what we have. So it looks much different already, and it's a little bit easier to read, and we have our 0 here. So everything is going to be greater than 0. But we still want to make it a little bit easier to read. So we're going to do one more thing, and we're going to start chunking down here. To do this, we are once again going to double click on the graph, and then we're going to right click. Okay, so notice how it highlighted all of those bars for us. And we're going to go up here to edit, and then see where it says properties. We're going to click on the properties window. And it takes us right here up to binning, because basically what we're going to do is we're going to put them in bins. And we're going to put them in bins, like I was saying, I think we're going to end up doing like 10 hours. Okay, so it's taking us to this binning. We want to customize it, and let's say we want 5 bins. Okay, so I'm going to click 5 and I'm going to click apply and close. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bins. And 2 final thoughts on this before we wrap up. The first thing is that just like in the other video where we recoded for our graphs, and I mentioned that we don't always have to recode. There's times when the graph will work and the data that we have works perfectly well for our purposes and we don't need to recode. In the same way, we will not always need to subsample. We only need to do that in certain circumstances. And then the second thing is that you'll want to make sure that you go back and undo the cases so that way you have your full sample. So remember how it crossed out all of these on the side here? Well, if you were to run any other analysis, it will omit those cases, and so you want to make sure that you're working with your full sample. And so you will need to go back and go to your data, select cases, and then go back to all cases, and then click OK. And now you have all your cases again. Wow, that was a lot, but I really hope that you did just follow along. My goal behind all of these tutorials is to make it very user-friendly for you so that you're not feeling like stuck and which button to click and where do we find these things. And so hopefully you're just following along and clicking right along with me on your computer. So that is it for this video. We have a couple more videos in this module and you are going to be an SPS expert by the end of this. So have a great day and I will talk to you very, very soon. Bye for now.